Hey gang, Private Jack here. A little while ago I was asked if I wouldn't mind doing a tutorial on how to rig up an airplane so that all the control surfaces moved properly. You could spin the prop, move the wheels, turn the rudders, all the rest of that good stuff. So uh, this is the first chance I've actually had to sit down and actually do this. So basically what I've done is I've created a little box model of an airplane in Blender. If you look at the model, you'll see that there's a bunch of different colors here. And the reason why I did that is basically anywhere there's a color change, there's going to be a bone. So, yeah. Anyway, make a long story short, before we get started here, let's have a quick look at the anatomy of an airplane. The anatomy of an airplane. Good picture. Elevators, flaps underneath the wing, spinner, fin, rudder, stabilizer, elevator, main wing, retractable landing gear, and cockpit area. Here's a better look. Retractable landing gear, ailerons, there's the flaps, here's the elevator, stabilizer, fin, and rudder, and propeller, and basically the spinner and the cockpit area. Now, some aircraft are going to have movable cockpits. They're going to have retractable landing gear. They're going to have retractable wheel gear. They might be a tricycle, or they might be a tail dragger like the Spitfire was. Same thing for spacecraft. Basically, wings, elevator, aileron, stabilizers, you name it. Anything that is considered a control surface that moves is going to require a bone. Okay, let's go back into our little box airplane here now. So here we are. Ailerons, left and right, flaps, rudder, fin, stabilizer, elevator, cockpit, spinner, fuselage, main wing, struts for the landing gear, wheels, and the tail dragger wheel right there. Okay, some aircraft will be either tail draggers, some will be tricycle type aircraft. So that's basically the anatomy of an airplane. Now for our little model here, I just finished building it, so it's all constructed. If I select all the parts, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find that all my origin points are in the center of the geometry where I built the actual element. Okay, and this is not good when you go to actually rig an aircraft. What you want are all these origin points for all the different objects down here on the center of the stage. And if you're building this thing for Source Filmmaker, that center point is going to become the root transform bone. Okay, that being said, also if I have a quick look, if I have a look at my canopy here, the location that is the origin point is not set to 0. Rotations are good, they're all set to 0, and the scale is good. If I have a look at the actual fin though, I'm going to find that the location is wrong. The fin has been rotated by 180 degrees and it's scaled at 0.25. So if I was actually to zero all these things out the way that they're supposed to be and scale set to 1, this is what I would end up with as part of my airplane, and that's not good. So I'm going to show you how to set this thing up, and then we'll get into actual rigging. So let me just back out of here. That's back to normal. Okay. The other thing what you want to do is you want to make sure that your aircraft is actually proportioned properly. So that what I mean by that is, are the wings in the proper place? Are the flaps and elevators in the proper place? Are the wheels in the proper place? In this particular case, this is a cartoon type airplane. It would do fine, and basically I could do whatever I want. But if this thing was an actual real airplane, this actual wing area here, I'm going to select the flaps, the ailerons, the wing. I'm going to select the wheels and the struts. this thing here, come back into side-on view, these wings would probably be more forward towards the front of the fuselage, like that. Also, these wheels would probably be a little bit more forward on the actual aircraft, on the wing itself, not right dead center. What you want is your aircraft to be able to actually land and not flip over on its nose. The wing itself would probably be just a little bit bigger. Let's see, can I do this without really screwing things up? No, I don't think I'll go there. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to get into the actual modeling of an airplane. What we want to do is we want to rig this thing. Okay, now that this thing is actually set up the way we want it, what I want to do is I want to bring these wheels back so that the center of the wheel is on the center point of the actual scene. So I'm going to select the whole airplane. I'm going to drag it back so that the wheels are practically center on there. And then I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to make sure that the wheels are touching the ground. Grab on the Z and pull it down a bit. Just about there. Okay. When I rig my airplanes, I like to rig them as if they're in flight. Some people like to rig them so that if they were actually on the ground like this, rotate, this thing would be sitting on the ground like this. The reason why I like to rig mine in the air is simply due to the fact that 9 times out of the 10, that's where you're going to see it. And it's a lot easier to place an aircraft down on its tail than it is to actually set it up in flight and have it flying horizontally. So I'm going to back that out. And also, when it comes to rotating bones and everything else, or placing bones, it's a lot easier if everything is the way it would naturally be in its flying position. Okay, so now that my aircraft is placed, what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the location and to all these objects. What that's going to do is it's going to move the origin points from where they are now down here to this center point on the actual scene. So the way I do that, select all the objects, come in here to Object, Apply, Location. And now all my object points are down here on the ground. Good thing about this is, let's say I move something because I decided I wanted to do something. Okay, and the plane starts falling apart. All I have to do is select all my objects, put my cursor in the center, and then do a shift selection to cursor, and the plane falls back together again. So that's another good reason to have all your origin points here in one location. As I said, the origin point is going to form the root transform bone of the actual source filmmaker model, if that's what you're building it for. Okay, now that that's done, we still have a problem with scale and rotations, right? Remember, scale, rotations, they're all out. Well, again, all I have to do is select all the objects again, come down here to Object, Apply, Rotation, and what that's going to do is it's going to set all the rotations to 0, which is perfect, which is what we want. And then I'm going to select all the objects again, come down here to Objects, and select Apply, Scale. Now all the objects are one-to-one-to-one relationship with the entire model. Okay, if you look over here, as I tap through the actual objects, and what this means is if I go to join these objects all together, they're not going to rescale themselves, they're not going to rotate themselves, or everything is going to come together quite nicely. Okay. 3. Now it's time to start our armature. or our skeleton or laying the bones. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate into front on view. I'm going to make sure that my 3D cursor is center. Shift cursor to center, and let me turn on screencast keys now. Screencast keys, where are you? There we go. Down here you'll see the buttons that I'm pushing and the keystrokes that I'm doing. And to add an armature, I'm going to be in object mode, and I'm going to press Shift A to add, and I'm going to add a single bone. And there it is. I'm going to use this as my root bone and basically build from it. So if I look at this on the side-on view now, I'm going to turn that into, where is it? X-ray mode, so that we can see the bone through the model. This is my bone, and it is now set up so that it will rotate properly on the X, Y, and Z axis. Okay. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select that bone now, go into edit mode, and I'm going to select that bone, and I'm going to scale it on the Z axis. Come on now, don't be like that. Scale it on the Z axis, SZ. And I'm just going to pull it down this way. My bones are going to be nice and small, and yeah. Okay, from there, I'm going to create the fuselage bone. So I'm going to zoom in on this bone. I'm going to select it. I'm going to press, before I do that, I'm going to press T to open up my tool menu, and I'm going to turn on X-axis mirror for the armature options. And this will come in handy really quickly here in a second. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to press E to extrude the bone. I'm going to pull that bone out on the Z axis, just like that. Okay, this is going to be my fuselage bone. So now I'm going to go into 3 to put it in side-on view. Come over here to my bone menu. I'm going to rename my bone to fuselage. I like to add BIP, bone in play, fuselage. And one of the things that I found that is if you're using Blender source tools to extract DMX files and your bone name is the same as a mesh object, Blender source tools can screw up it for DMX type files. Okay, so now that that bone is extruded, I'm going to come down here. I'm going to disconnect it from the parent bone so that I can move it freely, and I'm going to grab it on the Z axis and bring it right up here into the fuselage. There you are. And I'm going to place this bone basically where I think that aircraft would pivot if it was flying through the air. So I'm going to grab that and I'm going to place it right about here on this wing. Okay, the bone is still nice and straight up and down, and that's exactly the way we want it. And this is going to be our base bone for the rest of the airplane. So we've got a root bone, which comes up into a fuselage bone, and then now we're going to branch things off from here. So from here, I'm still in 3 side-on view. I'm going to extrude a bone, press E, extrude on the Z. I'm going to select that bone, change to 3D cursor. Shift, cursor to selected. Select the bone. Rotate X minus 90. That's not right. Rotate X 90. There we go. Must have been I didn't have the active bone selected. Doesn't matter. If you find that you have problems like that, use the 3D cursor, just bring it and put it on the item, the selected item, and go from there. Now from there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect the bone from the fuselage bone. I'm going to drag it forward into the spinner. I'm going to put it right there. Okay, next up is we're going to bring a bone back for the rudder and a bone back for the elevator. So we're going to select that fuselage bone. We're going to extrude on the Z. Pull it out of the head of the bone. Good enough. For the rudder, what we want to do is we want to leave this bone so that it's standing straight up. So all we have to do is disconnect it and drag it all the way back to the rudder. Now I'm just going to leave it there for now. And to make things simple, all I have to do now is grab that bone, do a Shift D to duplicate the bone. I'm going to grab it, turn this back to individual origins. I'm going to grab it on the Z. I'm going to pull it up to about where my elevator is center. And we're going to position these in a few minutes anyway. And I need one more bone to come back here to the actual tail wheel pivot, so I can actually grab that bone again. Make sure it's all selected. Shift duplicate it again and grab that and pull it back to the tail wheel pivot. Good. Now we're going to go into front mode, pressing 1 on the numpad, and the spinner bone that we pulled forward, I'm going to create 2 bones at the same time going opposite directions. And this is why we turned on the x-axis mirrors. So I'm going to go 1 for front view. Actually, let's do it from the top view. A lot easier to see this way. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in on this bone. I'm going to hold down Shift and press E to extrude a bone. And I'm going to extrude it on the x-axis. And lo and behold, Shift E creates 2 bones at the same times. And if you look in here at the actual armature, you will find, if I select that bone and find out what name it is, bit fuselage 1. If I come down here to bit fuselage 1 in my armature, bit fuselage 1, I'm going to find that it actually names it left and right. Okay, but you still have to disconnect them separately. But because they have that left-right relationship, when I grab a hold of them and start pulling them, they're going to move together. And from here, I'm just going to put it here into the propeller. Now, the reason why I'm doing the propeller is simply due to the fact that some people like to be able to change the pitch of their propeller, like the actual angle of the propeller. Don't ask me, I don't know. Okay, so back into 3 view. What do we have to do now? 7, we have to do ailerons, flaps, retracts, wheels, and I think that's about it. So let's come down here to the fuselage bone again, select it, make sure it's completely selected. 7. And we're going to do the same thing, only we're going to extrude on the y-axis so that it's headed towards the back of the airplane. So Shift E, I want 2 bones, on the y-axis, so press Y, and I pull the bone out. I grab the bone, and I will find that I now have a fuselage left and a fuselage right bone. What I want to do is disconnect them. And always make sure you pull the right bone to the right side of the airplane and the left bone to the left side of the airplane. Okay, right about there. And these are going to be my flap bones. So I'm going to move them forward right about there. Shift duplicate now. Shift D. And watch what happens. I duplicated both bones at the same time, and I can just pull them out into the ailerons. Now we have to go through and we have to rename all these bones so that they're proper, and basically we'll get into that in a few more minutes. Okay, so now that I've got these bones in, what I can do is just shift duplicate that bone. And what I want to do is from the top view, in Z mode so that I can see what I'm doing through the airplane. I want to pull it back on the X, and I'm going to pull it down here to where the retract is. Go into front view, pull them down on the Z axis. Notice how I'm moving everything on the actual left, right, and front, top, bottom view. That's so that I don't screw up any of the bone rotations or that kind of thing. And I want to rotate these on the x-axis so that the tail of the bone is pointed down towards the ground. So I'm going to go into 3 mode, and I'm going to rotate on the x-axis by minus 90 degrees. There we go. So now my bones are pointed down at the ground, and I'm going to grab one of those bones. I'm going to shift duplicate again. I'm going to pull them down, and these are going to be my wheel bones. Pull them into the wheel, and we'll go through and we'll position all this stuff in a few minutes. Okay, one more bone I think is all. No, we need 2 more bones. Off the fuselage bone, we need one for the canopy. Now some people, depends on how the canopy actually opens. Some people will use a shape key, and I'll show you how to do that. And some people will just use a bone, and we'll show you how to do that. So I'm going to shift from the top. I'm going to extrude one bone by pressing just E, not Shift E. I'm going to extrude it out. I'm going to disconnect it, and I'm going to come into side view, and I'm going to grab that bone. Oops, I want the whole bone, not just the tail of it. Grab that bone, I'm going to pull it to there, bring it up here, and this is going to be one of those side opening, lifted over my head type canopy openers, hinged right there. And I need one more bone in the tail, and that will be for the tail wheel. So I'm going to grab the tail wheel pivot bone. I'm going to shift D to duplicate that. Pull it down on the Z. Whoops. We'll fix that up in a minute, because what we want is we don't want this one connected to the fuselage. We want this one to pivot when we move the actual tail wheel pivot. So when we get into naming these things, we'll look at the connections then. Okay. So I think that is pretty much all the bones we need. And I'm going to kill the video here, go into part 2, and then we're going to set up the control surfaces to move with the bones, rename the bones, and get the aircraft into Source Filmmaker. So, until part 2, Private Jack out.